Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout joyfully to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. Let us shout joyfully to him with psalms. For the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods, in whose hand are the depths of the earth. The peaks of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for it was he who made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. For he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you would hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as in the days of Massah in the wilderness. When your fathers tested me, they tried me, though they had seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation and said, they are a people who err in their heart, and they do not know my ways. Therefore I swore in my anger, truly they shall not enter into my rest. I bring you back to Psalms this morning. We are going to intro 95, 96, and then we're going to spend our time in 95. We'll jump to 96 a little bit, but we'll come back and look at that next Sunday. But one of the Psalms that I enjoy greatly is Psalm 95. And it's interesting because we can see the influence of this psalm on our life in the church. If you notice the progression, how it starts, we begin with the call to worship, verse 1, verse 6. And then all of a sudden, in the second part of verse 7, we have today, if you would hear his voice. So we can almost see a typical daily worship in any kind of church we go into. We have that period of worship where we're called and we're ushered in. I can remember as a kid, you'd hear the music start to play if you were outside talking. You would hear the music play. You would hear singing start for those who were already in the sanctuary. And then we would come in and we would sing, and then we'd have this time of worship, and then immediately it would lead into a time of the Word of God, and then we go out. And we can see then how this psalm has shaped the life of the church and even the format, really, in the sense of how our service goes on Sunday mornings. And we sort of typically, any church you go to, you will see this. And it is likely, and it's been because of the influence of this song, but there's something more about this song to me than anything else. And it has been so instructive to me about worship. We oftentimes talk about worship and think about worship and that. But I wonder how much they could really sit down and ponder the scriptures and see what it says to us directly about how we should worship God. And I'll just tell you, when we come to the Psalms, we realize that the Psalms are, in one sense, they're man's words to God. But I'll just set the preface for you, and this is important to understand. We need to understand that first and foremost, it is God's word to his people. Now just think about this for a moment, because usually we come to the Psalms, we're thinking man's singing, man is expressing his feelings and his emotions, all the kind of things that he's wrestling with in life. We purely see as a work of man, but really it is, first and foremost, it is God's word to his people. It's a part of the sacred scriptures. So really what we have in this hymn book, and this is a hymn book, and I'll just tell you, this is the only divinely sanctioned hymn book there is. The only one. We use hymn books all over the place, and they're so much the same. In Russia, we sing the same songs we sing here. Same kind of hymn book, if you will. Sometimes we have a few extra verses that someone added, but they're essentially the same. In France, I was sitting in a church with some missionary friends of mine, and we're singing the same songs. Same exact songs, same hymn books. But here's the thing, none of them are divinely sanctioned by God. This is the only one that is divinely sanctioned by God. This is the only hymn book that if you want to sing the words from it, you never have to wonder if they're theologically accurate. Every other one you do. Some of the songs we sing, sometimes I cringe, sometimes I'm going, okay, it's not that big deal, but this is really... So we have a mix in our history. In our hymn books, there's stuff we sing. I'm just not on board with all that. Right? But this is one hymn book that we know it is divinely inspired. It is literally God-breathed. And so therefore everything in it is God's word. So really what we have in this hymn book is a cross-section between God's revelation to his people and Israel's response in faith to their God. And it's a great encounter that we have here, because in the Psalms we hear the voice of God in each of the Psalms, in the moods that are expressed in the Psalms, throughout the manifold themes through this Psalter, we hear God speak to us. And it's interesting, I can remember back when I was around 7 or 8, and there was something that was happening in life. And I really felt like I just needed to talk to God about it. And I can remember back, I took the family Bible, I went into my bedroom, I laid it down on my bed and opened up and I started reading. And I thought, if I'm going to talk to God, then I need to do it with His kind of language. Even at that early age, I knew that if I'm going to talk to God, then there's an appropriate way in which we speak to God. Sometimes I don't think we think about that. But do you realize that the Psalms tells us how to pray? It tells us how we can talk to God. There are some things you cannot say to God and shouldn't say to God. Right? There are ways in which we shouldn't talk to God. I don't know that we oftentimes stop and think about that. There are ways that we should praise God, and the Psalms tells us how to do that. And it tells us how we should communicate these things even in our personal life. I mean, have you ever stopped to think about, can I really say this to God? Would this be offensive to Him? Would this undermine who He is? Right? Is it okay if we complain to God? Just ask yourself, can I complain about what's going on in my life? So I think about the nation of Israel, right? He says at the end, he was, right, at the end of that, Psalm 95, his response to the generation, for 40 years, he says, I loathe them, right? What did they do? They complained. He brings them out of Egypt. They cross the Red Sea. I mean, seriously, you see water part. You walk across. You come out. 2 million people, they cross over. He's been taking care of them. All of this stuff, right? And then they're complaining because there's no water. So then I stop and go, is it okay to complain to God about my life and situations? Do we think about these things when we speak to God? I mean, we have free access. There is no doubt about that. But the thing about the Psalms is it really starts to challenge all of our life. And so it's really not just a worship book. It is this dialogue between God and His people. He is speaking to us and we're speaking back to Him, but we're using His words. So therefore, when we talk to God and think about God, we need to think about God as He has revealed Himself to us. Right? Sometimes you're talking with a fellow believer and they start talking about God and you're going, that's really not the God I see and hear, right? I'm not sure we're talking about the same God here. There are ways in which we are to think of God, talk about God. There are titles and designations. All of these things are revelations that God has given us about Himself. So as we read through this, we see that this is the Word of God. And so the Psalms, like any other part of Scripture, Paul says that all Scripture is God-breathed. And he says it is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. That includes the Psalms. But so often they're left out of our own quiet times even. We don't even read them. We don't pray them. Psalms 3 and 4, morning prayer, evening prayer. I shared them with my daughter and said, hey, pray this in the morning, pray this at night. Make this a part of your life. They're a great place to go, not only for encouragement and strength, but also for how to think and how to understand who God is. So it is all, if you will, God breathed out. And this is, we have translated in 2 Timothy, it is God inspired. That's a poor translation. Theopneustos, and it means breathed out. It's God-inspired, if you will, is what it is. In other words, every word is God's word to us. Every word of Scripture is. So if we're going to sing, and if we're going to worship, and if we're going to take our voices and exalt God and lift them up and speak about God and think about God, then the Psalms are a great place to help shape all of that. So I bring you to Psalm 95 and 96, and we're not going to get into 96 today, but we'll get into 95. But if we see any kind of progression here, it is that the people of God, we find in Psalm 95, they are singing and worshiping, and in Psalm 96, they are singing and then sharing. And really, we could designate them. Psalm 95 is a song to God, and Psalm 96 is a song about His salvation. But notice with me Psalm 96, verse 1, sing to the Lord a new song, sing to the Lord all the earth, sing to the Lord, bless His name, proclaim good tidings of His salvation from day to day. Just tell them forth. Tell of His glory among the nations. Just go tell people about God. Go tell them about His salvation. Go tell them about all the deliverances, and really that's what it is, about all the deliverances that happen in your life. That's all you got to do is just talk about it. So in the one, we have the community worshiping together, and they are singing together. In the next one, it is about singing, but it's about sharing. And I just give you this thought about Psalm 96. How many times do we try something we think, man, that's great. I really got to get so-and-so to try this. Right? So maybe it's seeing everyone drinking their coffee. Maybe it's a cup of coffee, and I like a real good cup of coffee. Well, find a good place, get a good cup of coffee, go tell us, hey man, you got to come try this coffee. It's really good, right? You do what? You sing its praises. And then you call them to come and join in on that. We do that with all kinds of stuff in our life. But how often do we do that in our daily life about God? But that's what Psalm 96 is. It's just calling the world, come and join me and sing about the good tidings of my God and all the deliverances that He has manifested in my life. Come and join me in the praise of who He is. So I'm not telling you don't praise the coffee, don't praise the pizza, but man, we really got to praise our God, right? Because He's constantly delivering us. So that is the progression. So Psalm 95, it's completely about worship. It is all about worship. We find references to the rock, the king, the creator, the maker, the shepherd. Over and over, we find these designations of God. These are how we are to think about Him, and we are to understand Him, and this is how we are to call out to Him. And the reason for our singing, we can see it over and over, verses 3 through 5. The Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods. And on he goes. So we have two sections in Psalm 95 that give us the reason. And the word for tells us that, verse 3. And the next one is in verse 7. We have for, He is our God. So we have reason to worship God. And I'll just tell you, it's theological reasoning. It's all based on theology. That's our reason to worship God. It's because of who He is and what He's done. And it isn't merely just the titles, it's just the actions that God has performed. We even see the attributes of God in the things that He does. So this is important because I know that sometimes with worship, the songs that we sing, we're not concerned if they're theologically accurate or not. And that's a shame. Because they are words spoken back to God. We are affirming and exalting and declaring things about Him. And if they're wrong, then we're singing to God things that are wrong. Right? And so seldom these days do people even care about the words that are coming out of their mouths directed towards the Lord. So that's why I tell you, Psalms is a great place. It's a great place to come and understand worship. In Psalm 96, we have the people who are still singing, but immediately moves out into testimony about the only God who is worthy of praise and who is going to eventually come and judge the world. And we can't leave that out in the worship of God. Sometimes we've got all the love, love, love we want, but we've got to remember He's righteous and He is holy and He is just. And He must account for all of those things that happen in this world. So Psalms 95 and 96 bring the Lord's kingship into relationship to the gods. Notice with me. 95:3, because sometimes people read this and go, are there really other gods? No. So Psalm 95:3, for the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods. And I'm going to fix that translation because it's unfortunate, but we'll explain it when we get there. But notice, above all gods. Notice Psalm 64 verses 4 and 5, or 96 verse 4 and 5. For great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the peoples are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Now, this is intriguing because here we have God's relationship to all gods, and we see that in these two Psalms, He is upheld as He is the one and only true God, and He absolutely is. There is no other God, and because there's only one, here's the thing, the logical conclusion, there's only one way to that one God. Okay? You cannot declare there is but one God, and then there are different ways to that God. Can't happen. It's not possible, right? So we hear that often. Well, it's the same God we're all going. No, unfortunately. And unfortunately, C.S. Lewis bought into that. But notice the play on words. Here's what's interesting in Hebrew. We have in Psalm 96 verse 5 reference to the fact that these gods, these so-called gods, are idols. This is the term in the Hebrew. It is Elohim, okay? And the term for God is used in Psalm 95 verse 3, Elohim. They sound exactly the same. Elohim, Elohim. There is a play on the sound of the terms when you would pronounce them. And it was to draw the attention of the reader to the play on these two words. And there is a sense of irony. And if you read through Isaiah, he will use this term over and over and over again. Okay? Now here's what happens. In the one, we have Elohim. Okay? He is the creator God. We have Elohim in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God. And it is the plural form. So you might ask yourself, well, in Genesis 1:1, if it's plural, right? Shouldn't we translate in the beginning, gods created the heaven and the earth? No. Here's how grammar works in Hebrew. The verb is singular. Therefore, it is translated singular. In the beginning, God, He created heaven and earth. It's plural because it's intensification to show the power and the almightiness of God himself. Okay? So here's the play on the word Elohim. So these other gods are not Elohim, but they are Elohim. They are idols. They are literally worthless. Images of the real thing. In other words, they are not entities. There is but one only God, and that is what this series of Psalms upholds. There is but one Creator, one Lord over heaven and earth. There is one King who sits on the throne. There is one true God only, and He is to be worshipped in the way that He designates how He is to be worshipped. Love this stuff. Can't get into all of it, but here we go. Sing to God, Psalm 95. Here is the pattern of the psalm. Not going to get into it. I could. This is one of the things that is so exciting about Hebrew poetry. Getting into the different techniques and stuff used. I'd like to walk through all that. Some other time we'll do that. But this is the flow of the song. If I put it into Hebrew poetry in the format that we would see it, we'll walk through it this way. The call to worship. Leku, here we come. Psalm 95, the first call to come, and we have a series of them. Psalm 95 verse 1, Psalm 95 verse 6, come, come. Both of these are imperatives. Both imperatives. These are something that God's people must do. But the first thing I want to notice is the nature of the call. First off, it's celebratory. It's celebratory. This is awesome because sometimes I think our worship sort of misses this. Notice if I can put the first two verses like this. Psalm 95:1, come, let us shout with joy to the Lord. Let us shout our praises to the protector who delivers us. Let us enter His presence with thanksgiving, literally meet His face. Let us shout out to Him in celebration. This is awesome. So I preached on this one time down south in Southern California in the church there, and the next Sunday a brother took on to this and he came in and man, we were celebrating God. I love that. Sometimes I feel like we're at a funeral. Okay? Now, does everything have to be upbeat? No. But here's the thing. There is a celebration when we talk about the salvation of God and the fact that He is Savior. And that is what He focuses on. He is the rock of our salvation. And there is much to rejoice in. And there's much to celebrate. But I'll just tell you there is a balance here. And this is a beautiful thing. There should be celebration. There should be praise. There should be joy in our heart. But it gets a little bit crazy sometimes. I watched someone send me this link to this church and they had worship going on. And seriously, if they hadn't told me this was a worship service on Sunday morning, I wouldn't have known. I would have thought it was a secular concert. You got the dancers all hyped up there doing moves that, man, I wouldn't do those before God, and I sure wouldn't do it in church for His people. And here they're going about, and you're just going, this is not worship. And I understand the point is they're trying to make it accommodating to the world. They're trying to bring the world in, and they're trying to be exciting and live and fresh and new, and that is fine. But there is a limit to where it can go. And if you notice Psalm 95, it does that for us. Notice verse 6. Come, let us worship and do what? Bow down and kneel. There is celebration here, but understand it is checked by reverence. It is checked by reverence. It's a tough balance to keep. But this is the balance that God expects. But it's a celebration. Let's celebrate the Lord. The next is it's supposed to be corporate. This is something that all of us are called to do. The community here is summoned to come and join in this purpose of celebration. Notice with me, here comes the imperative, and then comes what we call cohortatives. Let us, all the way through here, let us sing for joy. Let us shout joyfully. Let us come before Him. Let us shout joyfully over and over. Let's do this together. This is the one time I think that here on earth we're reflecting a little bit of what heaven's going to look like when all God's people and all of His creatures are going to worship Him. It's just a taste. But I love it. Because this is a time when we get together as a church and we all affirm same truths together with our mouths to God. That's awesome. Because here's the thing, most of the time with church, we're busy talking about the things that divide us, not the things that unite us. When we worship together on Sundays, this is a clear time in which we are all affirming by our mouths and with our hearts a common understanding of who God is, this God that we worship together. And would I wish, yes, and absolutely I do, that the universal church, that we could gather together anywhere, anytime, all of us, and affirm these truths together? That's going to be a great and glorious day, but guess what? It's not going to come till the end. Psalm 150, when every creature will affirm the lordship and the kingship of God. Notice the object of worship. Psalm 95 verses 1 and 2. The worship is given to Yahweh. Notice with me, he says, "Oh, come let us sing for joy to the Lord, the joyful rock of our salvation." Now he's going to give the reason in verse 3 and following. He's going to elaborate further on who God is. So that's really where the reason lies. But here is he's focusing on the object. Who is the focus in worship? I mean, it sort of seems like a ridiculous question to ask, right? But in this day and age, not so much. Far too much we discuss about what man likes about it rather than what does God like about it. And I've been a part of churches. I pastored. They asked me to come in when I was in Russia. I pastored 3 years in a church academ, Common Sky, and then they asked me to come to academ. And they were having all kinds of turmoil there. One of them was because they had the younger people who wanted a certain style of worship, and they had the older people, which that's all they ever knew was what they had. And it split the church right down the middle. And the young people want this, and the older people were going, look, we're not used to this, and you got to understand. And there has to be understanding of both sides, but you see what I'm saying? And it came down to just an issue of personal preference. When you realize the object of worship, that is the point of beginning in our discussion about how to worship. That's where it starts. Who's the focus? You realize that the term Yahweh, the name of God, is used almost 700 times in the Psalter? Almost 365 times we have Elohim. Read through the Psalms sometimes in different books. Look at the different names that are used of God. Who's the focus? Even at times when His name isn't mentioned, you know God's the center of it. Always, and always should be. So let us enter His presence. The psalmist says, literally, let us meet His face. Oh, that is awesome. Let us meet His face. So in those days, you knew that the tabernacle and the temple, that was a place in which God specially manifested His presence in the Shekinah glory, right? The beautiful thing about today is there is no special place. He is here. That's why at times, and I don't say anything, nitpick everything you hear people say, but when you fellowship with other bodies and you hear someone pray, inviting God to join us, you don't need to. It's already here. And would it be that if we really understood that we are worshiping before the face of God this day, wouldn't it change even like our attitudes, right? I mean, because sometimes we know we're mouthing the words, right? Our heart's just not here. It's somewhere else. It's back home. It's on all the problems of the day or the week and everything else that's going on. It's somewhere else, but rather than what it ought to be then with God. But here's where we meet Him face to face. It's a great experience that we have, that we can be in the presence of God and worship Him. And He is the saving rock. This designation is common in the Old Testament. We find it in Psalm 18 where He is referred to as He is the divine warrior. He is the one who defends and delivers His people. In this particular psalm, we see Him focused upon as the rock that provided the water that poured forth, that fountain that brought life and also delivered them from death. This is who God is. And this is still who He is to us as well. And it's interesting because I wouldn't think of God as a divine warrior, right? We sort of have this dichotomy. We have the God of the Old Testament and the God in the New Testament. And there have been even those who have divided the Scriptures and have rejected in the early church history, have rejected the Old Testament because that's an evil God because He's mad and what all of this stuff, right? And He's a warrior and He's taking people's lives. And but you got Jesus and He's all love and hugs and kisses. Right? And so they do that, and they've done that, but we do that. But you understand, God's a divine warrior. And He still protects us, and He comes and fights for us. He does. We don't always see it. That's why I love when the nation of Israel is going to come into Canaan, right? And they're going to take it over. And they come and they find the harlot. And she's like, you got to understand, everyone's hearts are melting away already, right? God's already been there. He's already working in their hearts. They're prepared for the people to come. He's in the battle before we even get there, setting the stage. And He is the one who is the fount of life, and He is the one who saves us ultimately from death. The manner of worship, notice with me. Shout with joyful exaltation, Piel and perfect. Shout joyfully, Hiphil and perfect. Shout joyfully, Hiphil and perfect. Over and over. It is just shout, shout, shout. It's okay to raise your voices. So I asked my son to play the drum this morning because there's not so many people here. And usually when there's not a lot of people, we don't tend to sing out very loud. But the more noise there is, the more we're willing to shout. Get our voices into it and shout to the Lord. In other words, the essence of worship involves giving ourselves completely to God in the attitudes and emotions, not just here, but also in our life. Bring the heart. Sometimes we got the mouths, but the heart is somewhere else. Right? It's all got to be in it. It's going to take our mind, our heart, our will, our emotions, everything in our will. Because notice verse 7. If you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts as in the day of Meribah and Massah. Right? Worship should take all of us. Complete, our entire being here, at that moment, worshiping God. Right? Not fragmented. The means of worship. Notice with me, sing with song of thanksgiving, sing with hymns, mizmor. This is usually the term that is used in reference to all the Psalms as a title to them, but it's words with music is really what it is. So the community worships the Lord with word and music, and that is really what we should do. And the praise should consist of not only outbursts of joy, but it should be appropriate. Okay? Psalms of thanksgiving. Use words and use music to express that thanksgiving to God, but do it in a way that's befitting. Sometimes you sing and you listen to the words and you hear the music and they don't work. See, if I'm lamenting the death of Christ on the cross, there's something heavy like that and burdensome, and then it's fine, but I'm just telling you, and it's a personal thing, maybe it's a personal thing, I don't know. I'm just saying that sometimes those things don't fit. You read through the Psalter, and if you watch the pattern in the Hebrew language, if it's deep and dark and despairing, it's taking you down. You're feeling an emotion at all, right? Because the thing about Hebrew poetry is you're supposed to experience it. Not just read it, see it, and understand. You're supposed to feel it. You bring all of you into worship with God, right? Just bring all of you to worship. That's why when you had the burnt offering, the beginning of Leviticus, right? That burnt offering, the whole thing is consumed. Why? Because that should be reflective of every worshiper of God, bringing the entirety of the thing and offering it up to Him. So notice with me the reason for the worship, the great God and the great King. And this is how I translate it. Unfortunately, in our English translations, many of them do it because the article isn't there in the Hebrew, so they translate indefinite A. But that's unfortunate because in the Psalter, in the Psalms, when you have such designations of God, they don't need the article. They're already definite. They're speaking about God. And so this is how I would translate it. The great God and the great King. So we sing, our God is a awesome God. No, literally it's our God is the awesome God. Not just one among many, because that's what A says, right? He's not one among many, and that's what these two Psalms are affirming. He's not like other gods. He is above other gods because they're not entities. So He's not a great God. He is the great God, and He is the great King. So to worship God is to ascribe to Him the supreme worth which He alone is worthy of. And God desires our worship to focus on Him entirely. Through the Psalms, it reveals how transcendent, how great, how amazing God is. And over we see God is the focus. God is the one who is exalted. God is the one who is lifted up. Over and over. Just read through the different names that are used of God. There is no doubt that He has center stage when it comes to the Psalter. Although man pours forth his own emotions. Notice Psalm 96 verses 6 through 8. Majestic splendor emanates from Him. His sanctuary is firmly established and beautiful. Ascribe to the Lord, O families of the nations. Ascribe to the Lord splendor and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the splendor He deserves. Bring an offering and enter His courts. Worship the Lord in holy attire. So I used to tell the young brothers who led worship for college group back down south, I used to tell them, take us to the mountain, talking about Sinai. Take us to the mountain. The flow then comes out of this. If He's the great God and the great King, then the depths of the earth are in His hand. The peaks of the mountains are His. The sea is His, for it is He who made it, and the hands of His formed the dry land. These just affirm these two truths. And I'll show you the patterning of the Hebrew. It makes it very clear that everything, in other words, when we talk about the kingship of God, it is absolute. It is total. There's nothing outside of His reign. So here's the order in the Hebrew. Psalm 95:4. It says, in whose hand, then it moves to depths of the earth, then the peaks of the mountains, and then to Him. Okay? So notice, we have depths of the earth, peaks of the mountains. Everything in between is embraced. It all is His. It's in His hand. He has it under control. There is nothing, the deep places that man can't even search out in the earth, to the highest peaks of mountains that we can't even ascend to. He holds all of that in His control and everything in between, and that's the point of this. Take it a step further in the broader scope of it. Notice with me. In whose hand are the depths of the earth? The peaks of the mountains are His also. The sea is His, for it is He who made it, and His hands form the dry land. Everything is His, and He's in control of everything. So here's the thing about the sovereignty of God. However we understand it, however we want to try to explain things, how it works and all of that, here's a simple fact. That when we talk about sovereignty in God, if it is not absolute, it is not sovereignty. In other words, we're talking about total control. Total control of everything. Bad stuff, good stuff. There's nothing that is outside of His sovereign rule. Not one single thing. I believe that. Can I explain every single moment? Can I find God's reasoning in all of it? No. And sometimes we'll never understand. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves of this. Things that happen in our life and we say, man, why did this happen? And why such evil going on? Why is this deed happening? Why is this? Just understand, we don't see everything that God sees. He is omniscient. He sees what's happening in the lives of so many people and so many things. We don't know how that event is going to impact so many other lives. We look at something like a Jim Elliot and say, man, how could God take a life like that, right? In similar situations, Stephen and Acts. Do you realize that Stephen's life being laid down was a threshold for the gospel to reach the Gentiles? Because what church started after that? The church in Antioch. It was on his death that caused the church to be persecuted and to spread out from there. It was because of that the church was planted in Antioch. We don't always see how things are going to work out, but understand this, God is absolutely sovereign over everything. That I absolutely do believe. And the psalmist shows that he controls everything, and then we come to the call to worship again. But notice the progression. The nature of the call, 95:6. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. It is solemn and it is corporate. The manner of this, I want to show you this because we can see this and we say, okay, well, it seems redundant. And here's how it's translated, bow down, worship, bow down, kneel. We say, well, it's the same thing. Here's the thing about the Hebrew. They're different words. There's a similarity, but there's a progression. Let me try to explain it to you. As it starts to move, they're all about worship. But as it moves from the first to the second to the last, there is a progression in which the psalmist is getting closer and closer to the ground. In other words, the first sense of bowing head, humbly. The next is bending the knees and crouching down. The next is down on the ground and even to the level of prostration. See, we begin with shouting of joy and everything else in celebration. We move to this. Why? Because next it's going to say, do you hear the voice of the Lord? See, this is the perfect place for us to be in when we come to the Word of God. The place of what? Submission. If He is the great God and the great King, then there should be reverence. Sometimes we're so flippant when we talk to God and we worship God and we think about these things. And the actions that are taking place are reflective of the attitudes that lie behind them. It is a humble heart ready to receive. The object of worship, the Lord our Maker, and then the psalmist goes on to talk about the reason He is our God. We are the people of His pasture. We are the sheep of His hand. He is the one who brought us in. And it's interesting because if you notice with me, we are the sheep of His hand. Now we had the reference to His hand earlier in the fact of creation and His control over it and all of that. This has to do with His care. His care. You just think about the awesome truth of that there is nothing that happens in this world that is outside the hand, the control of God, right? The whole world is in His hand. He controls everything. And you realize that same powerful, almighty hand, sovereign hand, is carefully and lovingly working and guiding in your life. See, the things that happen to us, sometimes we lament them. Do you realize that it's the love of God that brings those things in our life? And so often when we have trials that come and they chasten us, thank God, praise God, thank Him for loving you. Because that's what a loving father does to his child. Does he not discipline them? Right? It's that same powerful hand, is that same caring hand who cares for us in our life. The response then for us, we have voiced ourselves towards God. Now, God says, okay, hear my voice. And the challenge is to listen, to hear the voice of God. He says, the previous generation, they tested me, they tried me, they've seen all of my work, so they know what I can do and they know who I am, and yet they still tested and tried me. God was grieved for them for 40 years. 40 years of that entire generation. They erred in their hearts. They did not know God's ways, the psalmist says, and therefore God did not permit them to enter into His rest. Hebrews warns that this lack of yieldedness and obedience to the Word of God can lead to not entering into the eternal rest of God. This is worship. It's not just us singing to God, but it's also yielding our lives to be obedient to the voice of God when He speaks to us. That's true worship. It's everything. It's everything. Sometimes we come, we sing, we hear the message, we blow it off, or we say, I don't know, that really doesn't sound like what God wants me to do. Sometimes we don't come, we're not humble, we're not ready to hear the words of God, we're not ready to receive them. And then we walk out and think, man, that was a great worship service. No. It falls short if we're not walking in obedience to God, if we're not hearing His voice when He speaks to us. All the other stuff is just preparation. It's preparation. May God help us as we understand how it is to worship the God and the great King over all the earth. Let's pray. Father, thank You for this day. We thank You for the beautiful weather outside. Lord, we're so thankful for Your faithfulness to us. The fact that You created all things and You sovereignly control all things, Father, there is not one force in this universe that operates without being dependent completely on You. You are the uncaused cause. You have eternal right to reign over everything. And we thank You for the fact that we are Your people, that You have called each of us into a relationship with You. And we realize that only You can initiate that. And only You can change our hearts and bring us to Yourself. And we thank You for doing that. And we thank You for that loving, caring hand in our life. Your invisible, sovereign hand that leads and guides and directs, protects and delivers. We thank You for Your glad tidings, the deliverances of every day. And Father, I pray that we would declare that to the world, that we would invite others to come and join us in our worship of You, because You deserve it and You are worthy of it, and is solely to be Yours and belongs to no other. Father, pray for those who are traveling, for their safety, Lord, and bring them back safely to us, to this family here. Thank You for the fellowship that we have in Your Son and the dwelling of Your Spirit in us. We thank You for Him. And for Your truth, we pray we walk in it. We pray these things in Your name. Amen.